Death is inevitable. Even if you get reincarnated, it's just another chance to meet your end. I know that's not a super chipper or happy opening, but sometimes life can be, well, rather devastating. Naruto gave us a lot of high-octane action moments, and in between amazing action were moments of utter despair. In Shippuden, so many characters died, you'd think that George R.R. Martin was in the writer's room. Today, we're going to be looking at some of the most emotionally devastating moments in the Naruto franchise. Most of these will be centered around a character's death, but not all of them. Additionally, we'd like to highlight what made these moments so impactful to the characters and the story. Well, you have to rip the band-aid off eventually. I'll give you a moment to grab your tissues before we begin. You good? Alright, let's begin. From episode 1, we knew that Naruto's parents were out of the picture. Naruto grew up as an orphan and ostracized by the entire village because of what was inside of him, despite his parents' sacrifice. It was a major event that shaped Naruto's character, and he didn't even get to meet his parents until much later in the show. Knowing that, seeing Minato and Kushina's death play out still hurt us on a very personal level. It's just like the opening monologue of Romeo and Juliet. We know from scene 1 that these two are going to die, but that doesn't prepare us in the slightest for when it actually happens. We see it coming, we know it has to happen, but when it happens, I can't help but let the waterworks run. Oh, Naruto had a few father figures in his life. You could make the argument that Iruka-sensei acted kinda like a father, but he still kept his distance from time to time. The third Hokage made the arrangements for Naruto to be taken care of financially after his parents' death, but seeing as he was the leader of the village, he couldn't be too close to Naruto. Enter JIraiya, the pervy toad sage that would act as Naruto's mentor at the end of the original series and into Shippuden. We see a bond form between the two that is more than just disciple and master, which makes his death all the more tragic. What makes his death especially abysmal is the fact that Jiraiya dies alone. Naruto doesn't witness his death and only hears about it days after the fact. Imagine that your goal, your greatest motivation in life, was to kill your brother to avenge the death of your parents. Now imagine that all that hatred and vengeance was based on a lie. For Sasuke Uchiha, he doesn't have to imagine any of this. After he killed his brother, the truth about the Uchiha incident was laid out before him. What Sasuke thought was just a heartless slaughter of his people was actually the best possible option for Sasuke's survival, according to Itachi. The Uchiha clan was planning a coup of the village, and Itachi had two choices. Let them attack the village and have his entire clan wiped out, or assassinate his entire clan and leave him and Sasuke alive. This truth bomb shattered Sasuke's previous perceptions and nearly broke him, and drove him to hate the Leaf Village. Naruto Uzumaki, the pariah of the Leaf Village, never knew his parents. We know what happened to them as audience members, but it wasn't until much later that Naruto would get to meet Minato in a way. After the nine-tailed fox's power was sealed inside Naruto, Minato embedded his psyche into the seal in the event that Naruto began to lose against the fox's influence. While he may not be back in the flesh, this gave Naruto the chance to meet Minato, an uplifting and hopeful moment to be sure. Naruto would have a chance to see Minato in the flesh later in the series, and actually has a chance to say goodbye. These two moments mirror one another in a bittersweet mix. Overall, these are happy moments, undercut with the fact that they were only ever temporary. The next entry is a bit of an emotional roller coaster. This is what everything has been leading up to. The final battle to end all final battles. They've fought before, and when they clashed in the original series, it was nothing short of brilliant. Naruto versus Sasuke, this time for keeps. Okay, well, not really for keeps, but it was the fight to end all fights. We got to see these two dish out their greatest moves and techniques while their entire lives and struggles flashed before our eyes. It was monumental, it was a spectacle, and the way it ended just left me emotionally exhausted. One death is tragic enough, but sometimes you get a double dose of death, and it's just all too much to bear. Sasuke got his revenge on Itachi for murdering his parents and clan. Mission accomplished, yeah? No, because Sasuke learned the truth shortly after killing Itachi, which is already a pretty traumatic experience. So what happens when Itachi is brought back during the 4th Shinobi War when Kabuto reanimates him? Knowing him, Sasuke helps his brother defeat Kabuto and release the reanimation jutsu. Before he disappears and leaves Sasuke a second time, Itachi finally has a heart-to-heart with his little brother. He confirms Danzo's and Tobi's stories on what happened to the Uchiha clan, and admits that despite everything, the lies and deception, that he loved Sasuke always. One of the biggest upsets in Naruto was during the Chunin exams. During the final tournament, the first fight was between Neji and Naruto, the genius of the Hyuga clan versus the underdog. Since losing to Naruto, Neji had changed from a deterministic perspective to a man who took his own fate into his own hands. During the Fourth Shinobi War, Neji falls in battle after being skewered by the Ten Tails attack. He dies in Naruto's arms, emboldening him and Hinata to rise up and keep on fighting. He may have died in order to strengthen Naruto and Hinata, but Neji's sacrifice symbolized a lot more than a mere sacrifice. Before he died, Neji finally understood his father's choice to die for his friends. Neji died a hero and was remembered as such. One of the best parallels in Naruto is the similarities between Gaara and Naruto. Gaara was raised by himself mostly, though he had a family, unlike Naruto. Where Naruto was cast out and shunned, people feared Gaara. Both characters were pariahs in their own villages, but there was just one key distinction. Naruto finally got the admiration and respect of his peers, where Gaara was just feared. Throughout the series, we see glimpses of Gaara's backstory. He would try and connect with the people of his village, but because they all knew what he was, they feared him. Unlike Naruto, Gaara was selected to house the one-tailed Shukaku to be the village's greatest weapon. Gaara was used from the start, and while he and Naruto connected later on, Gaara's childhood was arguably worse than his. In shonen anime, grief is usually expressed quickly. Sure, they'll be remembered, and there might be some flashbacks, but the grieving process is rarely explored fully. Asuma's death was felt by everyone, some more than others. Shikamaru, the tactical genius of Team 10, arguably felt Asuma's death the hardest. The scene is short, but powerful. Obito's backstory is, well, let's just say a bit more tragic than most. He was a part of Team Minato with Kakashi and Rin. During one of their missions, Obito is crushed under a boulder and left for dead, but not before giving his Sharingan to Kakashi. Instead of dying, however, Obito is rescued by Madara Uchiha and programmed into believing in Madara's plans. Obito is not quite convinced to follow Madara, that is, until he witnesses one of the most brutal betrayals in all of anime. Madara kidnaps Rin and seals the three-tailed Isobu inside of her. Rather than be a puppet to the tailed beast, Rin impales herself on Kakashi's Chidori attack that was meant for a Kirinin. Obito witnesses this, and after feeling the sting of loss and betrayal, joins Madara fully. Sometimes you lose people along the way. Orochimaru is one of the most vile and evil villains in all of anime, and he was lost along the way. Once a part of the legendary Sannin with Tsunade and JIraiya, Orochimaru fell into some dark stuff and became the depraved evil shinobi we all know. In a scene with JIraiya and Tsunade, the two talk about their former friend over drinks. They try to make sense of him. What made him so bad? Most villains have some kind of tragic backstory for why they chose the path of evil, but neither of them could fully make sense of Orochimaru's actions. The two display a mix of pity, loss, confusion, and even a bit of guilt. Was there something they could have done more for him? Who knows? You knew this was coming, but we gotta talk about it. So, by the end of Naruto Shippuden, we all know the real reason behind the Uchiha incident, yeah? It was actually a complex political conflict between an increasingly oppressed clan and the government who wanted to keep tabs on them. Well, despite the reasons behind the slaughter, the actual event itself is still tragic. Itachi was given an ultimatum. Let his clan attempt a coup and have all of them wiped out, or slaughter them and save himself and Sasuke. Even though he disagreed with his clan's motivations to attempt a coup, it is never an easy task to slaughter your own parents in cold blood. Itachi may have appeared cold when doing the deed, but it was the hardest thing he has ever been asked to do, and he knew that one day he would have to atone for those actions. One of the first major antagonists Naruto faces is on his first mission. There, the team run into Zabuza, the demon of the hidden mist. He, along with his partner Haku, were sent to kill the bridge-maker Naruto and his team were guarding. Haku has promised to always remain by Zabuza's side, to be useful to him as a tool. He even sacrifices himself in order to save Zabuza. While Zabuza may appear to be a heartless and even cruel man, after Haku is struck down, his softer side becomes more apparent. Though not at first, after he heard Naruto speak so highly about Haku, does Zabuza wish to join Haku in the afterlife. With tears in his eyes, Zabuza is finally struck down and dies with Haku. Naruto has plenty of flashbacks to where Naruto was growing up alone. Some of these moments were more somber than others, but it all conveyed the same emotion. Naruto was isolated and ostracized by his community. One scene in particular really punched you in the gut, even if it was more subtle than the others. It happens when Naruto was around 6 years old and no one wanted to take him in or adopt him. The third Hokage arranged to have Naruto live on his own and pay for his living expenses. After everything was all set up, the third visited Naruto at his place to hand off his living expenses. Before leaving, he merely says, "Don't spend it all in one place," and then leaves Naruto alone, without any parental supervision in an apartment to live on his own. The silence and loneliness is overbearing. The bone snap heard around the world. Love him or hate him, Rock Lee was a character that was done dirty throughout Naruto. He was a fan favorite during the Chunin exams. His fight with Gaara was easily the highlight of the entire franchise. To this day, people still cite it as one of the best fights in Naruto, and it ended so tragically. The fight between Gaara and Rock Lee showed off so much power. It showed just what Rock Lee was capable of as a character. It makes it that much more painful that he was crippled for the majority of the first series and shelved as a side character for the rest of the franchise. Rock Lee may not have died during that fight, but his development as a character sure did, and that is just as devastating. Those were some of the most emotionally devastating moments in all of Naruto. Before we end the episode, we'd like to hit you with an honorable mention for this list. Asuma of Team 10 was one cool sensei. His death was tragic, but despite that, he used his dying words to roast his team. Rest in power, Asuma sensei.